are you growing like this in this economy? Jim Murphy says that he added 3 employees in the last 5 months and 4 in the last year. How about James Whistler? In the last 12 months, they have increased their customer base by 300%. And Akesh Gupta, who grew from a single-man operation to a 16-member team in just 4 years. Well, what are you waiting for? Well, let me tell you what the secret is. The secret is really to outshine your competition with application generation so you can win a bigger share of the business. That's the secret, and I'll show you how to do that. And we'll hear from all 3 of those MVP partners who will tell you their secrets in essentially how to grow your business. Imagine walking into a pitch meeting with a prospective client. And when you do this thing and showing them a prototype that uses their database, so it is real data from their environment, that took you just a couple of hours to prepare and build. And it just lets them visualize their aspirations immediately so that they can actually visualize the kind of solution that you might build for them without having to spend a considerable amount of time. What is their secret weapon? Their secret weapon is application generation. Application generation that allows you to create this application in a matter of a few hours, and then, of course, you need to customize from that point onwards. Well, what is Iron Speed Designer good for? Well, what you can do is you can generate prototypes and applications, and you can do this straight from your database or your customer's database directly without you having to actually do a whole lot of user interface work or other work. You can simply point to an existing database, and you can generate applications that are professionally designed, that look very good, that are fully featured, that are secure, and that are consistent across the board. In terms of security, it uses the latest and greatest types of security, including Active Directory and other areas. Well, we've got on the line 3 consultants that can show you how to do that. We've got Jim Murphy from River City Software in Austin, James Whistler from Acid Yellow, and Akesh Gupta from Lightspeed Solutions that will do that. Let me first introduce to you Jim Murphy from River City Software. Jim added 4 new employees in just the past year alone to his team, and he cut his development time by 50%. So Jim, take it over.
Thank you very much, Razi. I appreciate that. My name is Jim Murphy. I'm the president of River City Software Development. And today we're going to talk about a few things, things that might be interesting to you. We're going to talk about pricing, rates, and some other things about Iron Speed that are not going to be focused too much on the basics of the product. We're going to really talk about it from a consulting perspective that might help you. So
Jim,
first
share
about
your screen with us.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you for that. So first we'll talk about pricing. And the way we price is really dependent on however the customer desires. We have some customers that desire us to do things fixed. They give us requirements, we give them an estimate, and then do it to the estimate, and either the gains or the losses, that's really up to us, and it's not the customer's worry. However,
Jim, sharing the wrong monitor probably.
I'm sorry about that. I'm still learning how to use GoToMeeting after all these years, apparently.
Perfect.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right. So, but fixed pricing really depends on the customer's requirements. If they don't have very good requirements, well, then we can't estimate accurately what it's really going to take to do their project. So, if they don't have very good requirements, then we might want to do things on a time and materials basis, where we just basically start the clock, and as they explain what they want, or as we work on the screens and approve them by them, they may have changes and adjustments and things like that for us. And then also other customers might like things project-based, or basically they want a full-time equivalent resource or something like that, or maybe 1.5 people or something like that. So one note on fixed bid pricing, it does require extra pad in order to cover the unknowns. So if you're planning on fixed bidding something, if the requirements are very strong, there's always going to be an issue or two here and there along the way. So make sure you add a little bit extra. So where Iron Speed helps is there are fewer unknowns because a lot of the infrastructure is already done. We don't have design difficulties dealing with pagination and searching and all these kind of basic things that we used to have to do in the past. Instead, Iron Speed handles that for us and helps us get an edge. Now, what about rates? Well, the rates we charge really depend on how much work there is. If they have just a little bit of work, a couple hours or a very small amount of work, then we're going to charge a higher hourly rate. And if they have a longer commitment, a couple months, 6 months, a year, or something like that, well, then of course we're going to drop our rates down. So one thing, though, everyone always says that there's more work behind this. And if you just get this one part done, then there's going to be so much more in back of that. Now, sometimes that's true, and sometimes maybe they're just trying to get the initial rate down. So a lot of the time, excuse me, if they do have promises like that, then we'll, it takes a little gut feeling, and sometimes we'll work with them, and other times we'll just keep it. If they want to start off with a little bit, then we'll start off with the initial price, and then adjust as things go on. Again, there are always exceptions to that. Now, how IronSpeed helps with the rates is in a couple different areas. One is that customers don't have to pay for all this mundane infrastructure coding, all these administrative pages, and all this basic stuff that we always have to do. So because of that, right off the bat, the customer saves actually a good share of money. So therefore, they don't mind paying a consultant's rate for the hours that are remaining so much. So that's usually not much of a problem at all. Now, another area that IronSpeed really helps is with what I call coding comfort. It's soothing. The reason it's soothing to program in IronSpeed is because, again, there's no more boring pagination programming. We don't have to do the filtering and search encoding. And one of the things I like is we don't have to spend a lot of time in Photoshop. If we did these projects by hand, we would have to spend a lot of time in Photoshop making the buttons look nice and all these different things. And now with IronSpeed, there's so many different templates that it's really easy to find something that's in the ballpark of what the customer is looking for. So this allows us to focus on the fun stuff, business rules, formulas, all the stuff that really makes the application fun to work with. I don't know about you, but generally it's less fun or not fun at all sitting down working on pagination code again or something like that. So this is very nice that we can work on what does their business need and what's going to give them a useful product, and then work on those areas. And the last area relating to the comfort that IronSpeed gives is some people think that just because IronSpeed makes things comfortable for us to program, that now we're locked into a certain look or feel or something like that. Well, that is not the case at all. You can really get in and change IronSpeed quite a lot. And what you see is not only what you get. That's just a starting place. So if you just generate an app, next, finish, sure, it's going to look like a standard IronSpeed app. But by all means, you have the flexibility to work with that. So just to show you one example, I want to show you one screen here. This is a project we're working on actually today. And so you can see this is quite a bit different than the normal IronSpeed user interface. And this is just one example of how things will work. And you can see the basic IronSpeed elements hiding behind there. But you can also see that this sort of a screen is not normal, and we've modified master pages, record controls, the look and feel tremendously. We've changed it quite a bit. So just because IronSpeed makes it look a certain way does not mean that's all you get. And on top of that, when you start adding third-party controls and other types of things, well, then it just gets even more flexible. Okay, so one word of caution. It is important to know databases, especially as a consultant. You got to really understand normalization, how it all works, how IronSpeed is going to use the database structure in order to build everything. So when your database is normalized, you get more pages. The customers, sometimes the customer's databases look like an Excel spreadsheet, and that's very difficult to work with. So one of the things we like to do is we like to show up, get their database, and we might make several throwaway IronSpeed applications, just pointing it at their database just to help us understand the relationships. And instead of digging around at the SQL Server level or something like that, instead it's much easier to make an app. We can see how the screens work and really understand their database very, very quickly. So that's really helpful. And also with security, IronSpeed handles authentication, authorization. It can be done with a wizard, but at the same time, you can still enhance that. Again, what you see is not just what you get. You can add design time. Instead of design time security, you can add your own runtime security, data driving that off of a database and Active Directory and things like that. And another valuable feature, security for SQL injection. That's already handled and filtered at the IronSpeed level, so it's no longer a risk that, that we have to work with. And IronSpeed really helps all that by making classes and screen elements for hiding and showing and all that stuff to protect all of that. It's really a great help. So because of that, IronSpeed has really helped us to succeed, to build our business, to increase our revenues. We've expanded our business. We've hired employees in order to help with the work. Now we're up to a team of 6, and we've also moved to a larger office space. So thank you very much to IronSpeed, and we appreciate you seeing how we've done it. Back to you, Razi.
Thank you very much, Jim. Let's summarize what we heard over here from Jim Murphy here. As Jim pointed out, AppGen really gives you pricing flexibility. What AppGen does, it greatly reduces the development time so that you can do a variety of things. Like, for example, you can bid fixed price instead of time and materials. So you've got some amount of flexibility in what you can do. And obviously, from a client perspective, the fixed price bids are much more appropriate, effectively, and much more welcoming than kind of a variable, open-ended pricing, effectively. And most customers, as you said, as we said, prefer this fixed price. AppGen increases your margins, and one of the things that it does is by essentially reducing the development time, so that effectively what you can do is pad the fixed price bids in order to essentially have enough margin over there to provide the additional things that you need in order to essentially satisfy the clients and impress them as you go on. So with that, let me actually go to James Whistler, our second MVP at Acid Yellow in the United Kingdom. He increased his customer base by over 300% in the last year, and he expanded his market share so that 50% of his clients are outside of the United Kingdom. So let me turn this over to James. James, I'm going to transfer it over here. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm just struggling to see the invitation.
It's all yours, James.
Okay, can you see me now? Is that better? Can you, Razi, could you just confirm you can see me? Okay, great. Hi everyone, my name's James Whistler. I'm Managing Director of Acid Yellow. I'm going to run you through our slides now and how we've managed to grow our business over the recent years in this market. Some of what I'd run through briefly is very specific to IronSpeed, the product, and some of it's possibly more sort of generic business acumen or thought. So principally what we've done is we've tried to learn more about our business and our customers, invested time and money in trying to make sure that we are growing, and communicating how we're going to do that with our customers. But most importantly, what Designer has enabled us to do are the last 3 points there, which is impress customers, accelerate development, and as a result grow our profit margin, and of course deliver the solutions that our customers are looking for. So looking at the first point there, learning, spend more time or spend some time identifying your market and working out who you want your customers to be. We'd clearly like all of our customers to be large corporates with an enormous checkbook. That's not necessarily the case. But there's a wide range of users of IronSpeed Designer, all the way down from smaller companies such as we were, right the way up to the larger corporates. Knowing your strengths. How can you advertise them if you don't know what they are? Of course, using Designer, your single biggest strength will be speed, and making sure that people, your potential customers, are aware of quite how quickly you can develop something will be key to your success. In addition to that, the quality of your applications may well separate you from your competitors. So it's important to be aware of that and make sure that your potential customers are too. Clearly, you may well need to define your niche. The web app market is a very big one. We've yet to find a single application we couldn't build with Designer. But it may be that that market's too big for you to try to pitch to every customer for every single web app requirement. You might choose to specialize in a particular area. And differentiating yourself from competitors. As I mentioned briefly there, using IronSpeed will enable you to be, in the vast majority of cases, A, quicker, and B, of better quality than your competition. So you need to make sure that your market is aware of that. And lastly there, I'd say forget geography. That's something that we've done very much within the last year. The web app base market is obviously A, very large, and B, global. And the ability to work internationally now is actually much easier almost than it is to work with local customers. And that's where we've been identifying and trying to grow. Invest. Clearly, before you grow, you need to prepare for it. You need to make sure that you've got staff within your company who are going to be able to support your growth. A massive advantage with Designer, of course, is that the code model underneath an IronSpeed Designer-generated application is standard. So once you get staff in, you train them up to develop with IronSpeed Designer, you can move them from one project to another remarkably quickly. The code model is entirely familiar to them as soon as they move and work on that new application. Do you have everything you need? By that, under the infrastructure banner, this again is really thinking more about the global position. We've found a number of different products, all web-based, which have enabled us to support international customers just as well as we would be if they were local and we could drive to them down the road. I've mentioned training. There's always more to learn. Of course, that's true in the web sphere in general as well as with IronSpeed Designer. But make sure that your team are always training themselves on Designer, keeping up to date with the latest releases, and understanding all that it can do for you. Communicate. This is something that, again, using web-based technologies has enabled us to do to great advantage and benefit. Getting to know your customers is super critical, and by using web-based products you can do that very well. Something that we've tried to do increasingly within this current market under the No Job Too Small banner, big contracts are currently quite difficult to find. You may well be finding that yourself. We've tried to operate on a no job too small principle, build relationships with the customer, and then wait to see whether the big one comes tomorrow rather than today. We tried to improve the quality of all of our communication with customers, make sure that everything we're sending to them is professional, it's on message, and is of benefit to them and that they understand it. And of course, a basic piece of advice would always be to follow up with your customers, even if there isn't actually a great deal of an update. Make sure if you've promised them one that you give them one. Something that's worth mentioning on the No Job Too Small banner there, once a customer sees what IronSpeed can build them and understands how quickly it can build it for them and at what price, that invariably leads to more ideas for more applications. And that's very much where we've found our growth. By not turning away a customer with a very small requirement, showing them what we can do and what Designer can do, invariably that leads to another phone call. We get another call the next day. What else can you build for me? How much would that cost? So moving on to impress. First impressions, of course, make them count. That's very, very easy to do with IronSpeed. In fact, dare I say, Designer tends to do quite a lot of that work for you. So we use prototyping to great effect. Jim Murphy's obviously also mentioned that. The fact that you can build prototypes quickly, you can throw them away because you haven't done any particular work there, it really gives your customer buy-in to the fact that you're learning to understand what they want and that you're trying to make the application work in the way that they want it to. So part and parcel of that prototyping process is listening to your customer, learning how they like to do business, how they want the application to fit and to work, and using IronSpeed, potentially throwing away applications that you've already generated to make sure that you're servicing that requirement and that need. And of course at the bottom there, understanding the requirements, it's quite easy to second guess your customer and think you know what they're after. Don't ever make that assumption. It's always best to work with them, and of course Designer, by using the prototyping process, makes that very simple for you. Accelerate. So in this case, I'd talk again. We're discussing the prototyping approach. These two first points there are possibly the most important ones that we've found and we can use with Designer, and that I would mention to you. The first, with Designer, you can build it faster than you can write about building it. In the past, we used to talk to a customer, evaluate requirements, and write them a specification. We don't do that anymore. We understand the requirements, we make notes, and we build them an app. And then we show them the app, and we decide whether they like it, what they want to change, etc. The second point there, your customer will evaluate a prototype more thoroughly than they'll read a specification. Again, we tend to work under fixed price contracts, as Jim does, and if we've misunderstood the requirements, we need to go right back to the beginning. That can prove expensive. So using prototypes to make sure that we're on message, we're understanding the requirements right at that very early stage. Customers are busy. They don't have time to read a long spec. Invariably in the past, they've just signed them off, and that's resulted in great cost to us. The RAD approach, of course, rapid application development. Make sure it is rapid. Very difficult to do if you're using Designer to not make it rapid. I'd challenge you to tell me how you've managed to fail that. But of course, you can use the robustness of Designer code to reduce your testing requirements. And at the bottom there, most of what you might ever need to do has been done before. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't waste your time and your profit margin trying to evaluate how to work these things out. Use the forums, use the code repositories, understand whether other people have found the same problem. Deliver. Keep your releases well defined. We always make sure that any release of code to a customer has got demonstrable business benefit rather than just technical benefit. They like to understand how it affects their bottom line. Keep punctual, and obviously make sure that you're implementing quality control and understanding where there are bugs, that they're managed and controlled and resolved. So let's recapping on main points. We talked about learning, investing, communicating, impressing, accelerating, and delivering. There's one more which has most definitely been true for us in the last year. Be prepared to work harder than you ever believed possible. If you leverage Designer correctly, believe me, you will need to work hard because you will have plenty of work to keep you busy. So that's really all I had to say. Thank you for listening to me, and I will hand control back to Razi.
Thank you very much, James. I think what you heard from James is that no job is too small. The big contracts are currently hard to find, as you can imagine. However, a small contract today can lead to a big one tomorrow. Well, that's what leads me to essentially talk about maintenance revenue streams. No job, no application is just a one-time job where you would build it and that's the end of it. Every application to me is a living and breathing application that continues to live on beyond just the initial creation of that. So what you can do is you can add monthly software maintenance to your codes, which allows you to essentially add some amount of additional revenue on an ongoing basis. The application generation not only reduces the maintenance costs as well, because applications are identically structured. Once you have developed one application and you look underneath the hood effectively for that application, it looks exactly the same as another application, so that for your staff, for your set of people that work for you, there is no learning curve needed from going from one app to next. So the resources are much easier to move between different projects as the demand comes in or goes away. Not only that, when you add this monthly support services, you actually can include application training because of the applications are identically structured. And then these consistent app suites are much easier to sell to customers because when they have one application developed by you, when they want to develop a second application or a third application or a fourth application, they know very well that it's going to have that consistent look and feel. It has this consistent code, and it is consistent across the board. So it actually helps you sell into those accounts in a much easier fashion. Let's now hear from our third consultant, Akesh Gupta from Lightspeed Solution. He actually grew his team from a 1 person to 16 people in the last 4 years, and he evolved from essentially weekly project work to actually developing enterprise-level applications in IronSpeed Designer. Akesh will show you how his development team approach actually is using IronSpeed Designer to deliver great applications to his customers. Akesh, take it over.
All right, thanks, Razi. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Depends on where you're calling us here from. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Akesh Gupta. I've been an RNSpeed developer consultant for the last 6 years, and in the last 4 years especially, we have definitely seen the advantages and have actually grown the corporation from a single-man to 16-member team, as Razi mentioned. Now, I'm just going to introduce a little bit about methodology. As my peers, Jim and James have mentioned, RNSpeed is a great tool. Now, whenever we are all as a consultants or as a developers trying to develop a software, we should understand that software is not about making something. It's about making something that works. If you look back into your own history, how many times you had a lead, converted them into a client, but not able to keep them as a customer because either we were not able to deliver them on time, or it may be that we delivered the first installment, but we were too busy for the second installment, and so on. So as a software, we have to work towards delivering something that is useful, and the software development is the act of creating that software. And the business challenges, as I mentioned, are people keep changing requirements. Customer is always right. You can't go back and always pull up the contracts with them to say, guess what, this was not a requirement. Are we still going to be able to deliver on budget and on time? That's very, very hard these days, because as requirements change, priorities change. And when you are delivering something, how much QA are you doing? From my history working as a software development, in the software development industry over the last 20 years, a typical company spends almost 50 to 100% equivalent of the development time in doing quality assurance. If you folks have ever worked in any software development company, you will see that there's a whole QA process testing. And of course, when the project is rolled out, how many companies are interested in providing maintenance? The reason they're not interested in providing maintenance and support is because they feel it's too little for them sometimes to maintain things. Just as it's too little for them to have a staff who is knowledgeable about the whole product line. Let's actually focus on why is it hard to develop these days. First of all, we are not leveraging from what people are putting in one. Like, for example, the most common thing that people are using is a waterfall approach, where every single section is defined, has to be completed, but a lot of people are not taking advantage of what was learned in the system analysis and the system design stage. As we are looking for resources to work with us on a team, how is it that some developers work very well and some don't, or some styles don't work well? Now, how do you keep the application consistent? As a developer, when was the last time you took a vacation, and why? The reason is because if one developer has been given a code to write something only he or she knows, it's not very easy for anybody else to maintain. And as you're writing the code, will it be fully validated? This is another big thing. You make a change, and the first thing your boss or the client will ask, how do I know everything is working? Everything is working right. Will the users find your system easy to navigate? And how will the support and revisions be? These are some of the challenges which I faced when I started on my own 12 years ago. And I was always doing small jobs because nobody wanted to give me a big job because I couldn't produce the timeline or the applications. That's when I discovered RNSpeed in 2004. RNSpeed took my system design, which was my data model, and in those days, I was able to deliver my fully functional app in 3 days. And I'm not even joking, guys. When I took RNSpeed Designer to the type of audience I was catering to, it took me 3 days to deliver my first app. I started looking in Visual Studio, and I saw so much consistency. More than 80% of the code is something that RNSpeed generates, and it is so consistent that if you find a change that you have to make globally, you can literally do like mass find and replace, and it works. The business layer and the data access layer, which has been integrated into the RNSpeed Designer, is rock solid, to the point where some projects we have just used this product, RNSpeed Designer, to build a business layer and a data access layer, especially if you are writing web services. For those of you who are trying to even design and develop iPhone apps, you need on the other end like the web services which can communicate. And to write those web services by hand without any proper business layer and data access layer becomes challenging. The interface that RNSpeed generates, it's extremely responsive. And it's very user-friendly, as Razi has mentioned and other peers have mentioned. Once a user finds how to use one app, all the other applications become quite easy to pick up and for the users. And lastly, most of the applications that we have delivered, the customers are still with us. The reason being, they ask for enhancement, they ask for a change, we say no problem. The reason we can say no problem, still deliver, still be profitable is because we don't have to go through all the bells and whistles which a typical software development firm may have to go, especially to make sure that the proper staff is available who worked on the original project, proper staff is available who can do the validation, and so on. So who are we? We are an agile software development company. The waterfall approach is not working these days because the timeline that people are asking to deliver in is just not enough. We're a software development company which have used RNSpeed to facilitate robust and rapid application. Our solutions are in production at Fortune 500 companies where the defect rate in a real-world environment is less than 10 defects during the lifespan of the product, which is unimaginable. We believe the way we work with RNSpeed Designer, it can develop and deliver solutions in 2/3 the time of a standard development project. So as soon as the customers see that there's a 33% savings and things are going to be done on time, on budget, and there will be 100% foolproof, robust, you have a solution. Clients are interested in hearing about it. And what's our development methodology that we are able to achieve because of RNSpeed Designer? The first thing we do is we design. We basically discuss the scope, build the prototypes, as you have heard from all the other folks. We build use cases. We build our data model. The more time you spend on the design is really the secret of using RNSpeed Designer, because RNSpeed Designer relies on your design a lot. I'm sure you folks have heard about the factor of 10, where the sooner you find a defect, you are saving 10 times the effort. So after we have gone through a few iterations in the initial design stage, then we go and design what we call as our first iteration, where you are standardizing how you would like to use the product. RNSpeed Designer gives you so many application level options. They call it application generation options. It is very good to plan those application generation options so that any page that you are generating is going to be consistent. You can very well imagine if you already have developed 100 pages and then you have to go back and retrofit something on all 100 pages, it will take a lot of effort. And that's where the design comes into play. With the design, you design your first iteration where you validate how the application in terms of usability, how your prototype is going to be acceptable by your clients, and so on, before you dive into the second iteration where you're really writing the logic, writing the workflow, building the visits, and finally the deployment process. We have found that this 4-stage process has worked very well for us. What have we achieved? We have built a 16-member software development team, and some of our projects have even been able to beat the outsourcing prices. I know it's hard to believe, but we have done it. We have 100% success rate with on budget and using RNSpeed and agile methodology. With databases which have over 80 million records, the response time is still in less than 5 seconds, which is really, really amazing. We have shared creative solutions in manufacturing, retail, communication, automotive, pharmaceutical, and defense industries. And of course, we have delivered RNSpeed workshops. This is where folks understand how RNSpeed solutions are a bit different than a typical code generator that you see on the market. Most of the folks are just working with code generator. There are very few application generators. As a matter of fact, I've not seen a product like RNSpeed in the last 6 years, which has provided the flexibility and the ability for you to keep on doing iterations with their tool without losing anything that you have done in the past. Here's an example of an application which, of course, like Jim Murphy said, RNSpeed gives you so much flexibility that you can build an application which will just be totally custom look. It's all done within RNSP Designer. So hopefully I'm able to explain to you the benefits of RNSP Designer, especially when it comes to using their data access layer, business layer, and their consistent code model. Just as a side note, for those of you who have ever developed a solution where you have implemented the concurrency validation where we say no two users should be allowed to edit the same record at the same time, and you know how much effort that is to be implemented on every single entity one at a time, RNSP has already come to our rescue by doing it all as part of their product line. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope that you can see how we have benefited using RNSP Designer, and I will actually pass it back to Razi again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Akesh. Let's summarize what some of the things that Akesh talked about here. AppGen actually helps his team of 16 people give tremendous amount of flexibility to him. Not only lets him stratify the development team so that effectively the less skilled team members can be utilized on a variety of tasks versus the highly skilled ones can focus on the database design. For example, what you can do is essentially target the senior developer to essentially focus on the database design, focus the page layout on essentially somebody who is like a graphic artist and so on, because there's no HTML or coding required, and the business logic could be on a junior or mid-level developer, and this essentially has enabled him to effectively grow his team to a 16-member team and deliver solutions across the Fortune 500 companies that he talks about. Well, let's talk about why we should be using RNSP Designer. Well, at the heart of it basically is to essentially use generation to accelerate the development. Accelerate it because you can essentially not only speed the application development, but considerably cut software development costs. And then Akesh and in fact James also talked about it, that the tremendous amount of time that is spent on QA and testing can be tremendously reduced because you are essentially utilizing the same pattern across multiple applications. And of course, because of that, we talked about earlier as well, that because this pattern is across the board the same across multiple applications, it considerably simplifies maintenance of applications from one application to another. Here's like a quote from Robert Riviera from the Los Angeles County Health Department, where he talks about how RNSP Designer has cut his development time by more than half and has made his development team much more productive as a result of RNSP Designer. What can RNSP Designer be used for? As James said earlier, he hasn't met an application that hasn't been doable in RNSP Designer. But here are some examples of that. You can actually develop business process automation applications. You can develop, these are just some minor examples basically of things that you can do. And if you go to our website, there are close to 100 different case studies across from many different industries and many different application types of building all of these different types of applications, whether it is reporting and tracking applications, workflow and scheduling applications, but also in a great majority of the cases, you can actually use the product for rapid prototyping so that you can walk into your customers, basically, even whether it is the internal departments or external customers, that you can actually utilize rapid prototyping to show them and visualize what an application might look like before actually, and then your interaction with them is much more productive because of this rapid prototyping and rapid application development. What does RNSP Designer generate? Of course, as we talked about, it generates web applications, and then it does everything for you that is required for that web application. At the end of the day, you've got a fully functional web application that includes all of the ASPX pages, includes all of the code behind files, C# and Visual Basic, data access layer, and stored procedures. So you've got a complete N-tier application straight from your database. So your database is the input for your application. The schema that you have specified or the schema your customers have specified is going to be used in order to create your application. So let's give you a very quick demo of how RNSP Designer works. It uses essentially rapid prototyping and rapid application methodology in order to create that through application generation. So I'm going to switch over to RNSP Designer. This is the start page effectively that you launch when you start RNSP Designer. When you first build an application page, okay? There's, I think, a slight delay on your screens to catch up, basically. There you go. So what I did was I pressed the Build an Application button and brought up the application wizard over here. And I go through a series of 6 or 7 steps in order to specify various options that I want for my application. The first option is actually to select the look and feel of my application. And in that case, I can look and choose different color schemes, for example, that I might want, and the green and the yellow, the blue and the red, and so on and so forth. I'll just pick one of them, and these are called with different names. Like in this particular case, it's called Alps. The next thing after that I do is I select one of the databases that are available to me already. So in this particular case, I'm using my existing database rather than essentially, or in this particular case, you can use the customer's database. In this example, I'm using a sample database built on top of Microsoft Access. The next thing that I choose to do is to select the different kind of pages that I want. Now, this is actually an iterative process. This is the first time that I'm selecting these pages, but I can go back and add more pages or delete some of these pages and change them or modify them. But this is just a starting point of what I can do. I'll go ahead and select certain tables for which these pages are selected. So on the left-hand side, showing me the different kinds of pages that I have, like maybe a show table page or maybe an add record page as an example that you see in the middle, a kind of a sample of how that page might look like, and then the different databases for that. So what ISP Designer is going to do is create these 9 page types that I've selected on the left-hand side for these 5 tables that I have selected over here. I'm not only limited to building. Now, in some cases, what happens is your database that the client gives you is not fully normalized or does not have all of the foreign keys set up properly. So what we can do is use ISP Designer to essentially enhance your application, enhance your database without actually changing the underlying database schema. Next thing I can do is I can select I can create a multilingual application. So if you have customers internationally, for example, in France or Germany or other places, you can actually combine multiple languages together and build internationalized applications. And finally, I have a choice of what is the nitty-gritty details that I can select, whether I want Visual Basic.NET or C#, whether I want a particular framework version, whether I want inline or stored procedures, and you can even develop SharePoint applications as well. At this point in time, I can just go ahead and press the next button, and it shows me that I'm about to create 45 different pages for this application, and I'll go ahead and press Finish. And this is where ISP Designer will go in and retrieve the entire schema from your database, looks at the schema, looks at the different data types, looks at all of the relationships between the different tables, and starts going ahead and creating the pages that are necessary as part of doing it. So you can see the number of pages that are being generated, the number of code behind files that are being generated in order to essentially create your application. And in just a matter of a couple of minutes, you will see a fully functional working application running in a browser for you. And of course, this is just a starting point. It's not the ending point. The starting point being that you can take this application and then essentially now customize it and modify it to yours or your customer's liking as the need be, basically. Okay. So here's where you can see the application being compiled and brought up to in my browser over here. And you can see the fully functional application that is available to you here. So here is a page, for example, in this case, it's showing all of the categories of different products that I have, shows you the different category names, shows me a description that is shown over here, maybe an image of that category that I can pop up and show that, and so on. But not only that, I've got essentially pages which are much more sophisticated than that. So I can look at basically a show an employees page, for example, contains all of the details of the employees. If I need to add an employee, I've got the add page retrieved for that. And in these pages, you can see the richness of these pages that are already there without you having to do any effort. We recognize, for example, that there is a date field and automatically show you a calendar control for that. We recognize, for example, that there is a lookup table available in the case of the title of courtesy, for example, and display that lookup table. Some cases we recognize that there is a password field and show stars in order to protect that password. We automatically essentially recognize that there are larger fields where you want to edit notes or other things, for example, and automatically format that so that you've got the rich text editor over there. So you can see the richness of the application that's created in a matter of minutes without you having to do any kind of additional work just as a starting point. And of course, you can go through this thing and do additional things with it. So here's where your opportunity comes in. Do you need more leads? Well, guess what? If you become an IronSpeed MVP, this is where we can essentially, when people come to us, as you know, we do not offer consulting services over here. We only sell the software product. And what this allows you to do is become an MVP in order to essentially get the leads from our account managers. By working directly with the account managers, you will be able to essentially benefit from the leads that are coming over here that we can pass on to you as the need arises effectively. And then, of course, not only that, as an MVP, you can benefit from, you can participate in the IronSpeed beta programs. You can actually get exclusive product roadmap briefings. And then, so if you're interested, this is the next step, is to contact your account manager and get started on this process. So with that, let me take questions at this point in time. What I will do is I will read off the questions, and in some cases, the question may be to a specific MVP, and I'll pass it on. Or answer it myself over here. So here's a question from Scott. Scott is asking, actually this is a question for Jim. Jim is asking, do you tell your clients that you use IronSpeed Designer to help save them money, or do you just let them think that you're really fast with code? Jim, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it really does depend, and sometimes I may just use IronSpeed as my secret weapon and not tell them, and other times what I'll do is, in order to win the competitive bid or to show them how we are different from some of the hand coding competition, we might tell them, hey, look, here's an idea that we have, and this might save you a whole lot of money, and we can use this, and then that ends up securing the deal for us.
Okay, so thanks so much, Jim. Here's another question, actually from Edward. Edward is asking, imagine walking into a presentation, how did you develop the leads contacts? We're already an IronSpeed developer and love it. Edward, a lot of times what happens is the account managers, and I think I addressed this in the last slide, our account managers and our sales representatives over here are hearing from the customers. We are always in touch with them on a regular basis. And what this allows them to do is effectively you can work with these account managers, and these account managers, when they hear from customers, they can then essentially qualify these customers and then pass these leads on to you effectively if you are an MVP. The other thing that happens is most of these MVPs are they also have other opportunities to be essentially in front of the customers through the forum by answering a lot of questions that come up from the customers. And all of these MVPs also offer a number of training classes effectively. So all of these combined essentially allow you to essentially have a face in front, and of course you are present on the MVP page of the IronSpeed website as well. And what this allows you to do is essentially be a recognized authority on IronSpeed Designer, and that's where you get the leads and the contacts here. Okay, Simon is asking, you started saying out, do you let prospects know that you'll be using IronSpeed, or do you keep it a secret? I think, do you keep it a secret as a competitive advantage? James or Akesh, do you want to also take a crack at this and answer that?
Okay, guys, I will do that. All right, we definitely do tell the clients that we are using IronSpeed Designer for the mere reason that we want them to know how we have found a creative solution to their everyday problem. And when we share with them why it will be better in the long run, especially from the maintenance perspective, they tend to love it, and they start thinking how can they also utilize IronSpeed Designer for their other projects that they have in mind or in the pipeline.
I'd certainly agree with that. I'd say that in the initial stages as a small company, trying to pitch your services to a larger firm and remain credible is quite difficult. If they believe that you're going to develop all of this code by hand, questions about quality start to come in, that if you can prove you're using a product like Designer, it's quite easy to sort of bat those concerns out of the way, if you like. So it's certainly been advantageous to us in that way.
Thank you very much, Akesh and James. Alberto is asking, what third-party controls do you guys recommend for business applications? Jim, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. We favor the DevExpress controls. They have a fantastic grid, especially dealing with very, very, very large data sets, and it has some nice features. So we use that. Sometimes we use the Telerik controls, and those are the two third-party controls that we tend to favor. Although a lot of them are available and other MVPs use, Infragistics or something else as well.
Great. Akesh, you want to also maybe take
Sure. We have been actually also using DevExpress and also the Telerik control. But the way RNSpeed works, you're not limited to any third-party control. As a matter of fact, there are videos available on the RNSpeed forum or the RNSpeed website which shows you the process of integrating with any third-party control that you find in the market, whether it's a reporting tool, graphics tool, or just a control to display data. It's very easy to work with the control. Of course, we recommend that anyone working with third-party controls should first familiarize themselves with the control itself in Studio so that it makes it easier and you're not trying to constantly think, is RNSpeed at fault?
Thank you, Akesh and Jim. Next question is from Keith. It would be nice if this was recorded and put in members area for future reference. Thank you so much for that suggestion. We'll take that into consideration here and do that. Benson is asking, it would be nice if this was our hope. Some of us will be able to get a summary note of this conference from each presenter at the end. Sure, I can ask each one of our MVPs to summarize this at the end. It's coming to the top of the hour, but we'll stay on and answer all of your questions. I've got another 15 or 20 over here, so please be patient with us. Is asking, ISD is great, however, can we develop MVC apps? Are there any plans to upgrade? Let me answer that. Right now, RNSpeed Designer does not support the model view controller methodology. But in many ways, effectively, the kind of things that you are doing, essentially using the data model in order to create that and using that as an input is actually greatly beneficial, effectively. So you are creating that model, except that model is essentially the database schema, effectively, that you're using. James or Akesh, do you want to comment on this approach?
All right, I will actually take that. We definitely also have developed the MVC applications. The first challenge that we ran into the MVC application generation process was that there were not that many third-party controls available, so you are somewhat limited. Of course, it's an evolving market, and I'm sure in time to come, things may adapt differently. But as of right now, the demands which have been kind of requested solution, MVC framework is not able to deliver. That has been our experience so far, especially when you talk about more complex applications.
Thank you very much, Akesh. Is asking, our speed goal is to eliminate coding. Great, but how can robust app be developed without coding? Example, customization. James, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. I mean, the answer to that really lies to a very large degree with the other features that ship within the product. When you first generate your application, it very much comes into a sort of vanilla generated app feel, but you've got features such as the code customization wizard and layers of your application to support additional functions. And now with version 7 available, we've got the formulas tab. So in the vast majority of cases, the good number of the sort of more standard customizations and additional features you would want to add to your application still don't need any coding. So they would have the same robustness that your generated application would. Of course, ultimately, if you really want total control of the application, you would need to delve into the code, but you can now achieve an awful lot of customization without having to do that.
Thank you very much, James. Next question is from John. Are there RNSpeed Designer generated apps that incorporate drag and drop functionality? John, if you're asking about drag and drop functionality in order to modify certain things, the answer is no. Certainly, IronSpeed Designer as a tool itself has a tremendous amount of drag and drop functionality in order to customize the look and feel of your application. So if I didn't understand your question, please ask it again, and I'll be glad to answer that for you. Peter is asking, can IronSpeed Designer be used to develop 2 or more applications that can combine them in a single environment for the customer? Jim, you want to answer that question? I think you had developed certain things using the security and authentication and authorization in order to take advantage of that.
Yes, there's actually several ways to do that, and that can be achieved either by having 2 separate applications that happen to look the same, application-related scenario, because you only want the user to log in once. So there's lots of ways to achieve that, and it does take a little creativity. What we've done is we've done in 2 ways. One way is with Windows authentication. It'll automatically handle the authentication without prompting the user for their credentials all over again. And the other way is to make to save all of the login-related information in a separate database. So kind of having a third database, and therefore both applications can authenticate against that third database and then use their respective database or a shared database or something like that for the app. So there's a lot of ways you can solve that. And once again, IronSpeed doesn't limit any of those things, but it does take a coding and creativity in order to pull that off.
Thank you very much, Tim. Next question comes from Alan. If I have previously created an IronSpeed application in Visual Studio 2008, how can I convert it to 2010? If so, how is that accomplished? This is more of a support question, Alan. But basically, if you go to the application wizard in version 7.1, you can simply switch to the Visual Studio 2010 option and press the Finish button, and your application will be upgraded to Visual Studio 2010. Next question, also from Alan, comes, what are the requirements to become an MVP? Well, a few things, basically. Of course, you need to be committed to and using IronSpeed Designer. You need to own a license of IronSpeed Designer, or at least one effectively, and then be current with the current version of IronSpeed Designer. You also, MVPs traditionally work with licensed customers, and effectively there is a qualification process that we go through. The best thing in order to essentially understand this qualification process is to contact us. I would recommend that you contact your account manager at this point in time, and then they will direct you to the appropriate person inside in order to get additional help with that. MVPs work, as I mentioned, only with licensed customers rather than trial users, for example. And they must be, as I mentioned, current customers here. Patrick is asking, what additional software tools are considered for use with IronSpeed? Visual Studio or any additional software? James, you want to talk a little bit about your tool set that you use in order to develop applications with IronSpeed Designer?
Yeah, sure. We clearly use Visual Studio all the time. The combination of Studio get the full IntelliSense to help you develop code there, debug in Visual Studio, and then immediately find all of your changes worked back into the designer environment makes that very easy. Depending on which database we're using, we also make extensive use of Redgate utilities for SQL. But to be honest, in the vast majority of cases, other than third-party components, we use Telerik, as Akesh mentioned earlier. We rarely need to use additional products other than that combination of Designer and Visual Studio. That certainly gives us the virtually all of the functionality that we would need to develop any application.
Jim, you've got anything to add to that?
No, that's essentially the same. We too use the Redgate utility things. So between Designer and Visual Studio, then we have the third-party controls where we license from 2 different companies, Telerik and DevExpress. And that ends up being almost everything that we do, unless there's a strange requirement where we need to purchase an additional third-party controller toolkit or API or something like that.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. I think that's the beauty of Iron Speed Designer, right? For in terms of your development, you can use Iron Speed Designer and then maybe a little bit of Visual Studio when you're doing lots of code customization. Of course, you need, one of the things that we try to do is not try to duplicate functionality that already exists in Visual Studio, as an example, like the debugger and so on. They're great tools that are available. Take advantage of that. What Iron Speed Designer is great at is creating new applications, modifying the layout, and customizing it with the formulas and other means here. Alan is asking, are there any fees for the MVP program? Well, you know, we didn't think about that, but maybe we should add some fees over there. But no, currently we don't have any fees at this point in time for the MVP program. Doug is asking, do any of you use automated test bed for testing your Iron Speed web apps as part of your QA process? Which ones? Akesh, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. Actually, we have used the automatic testing tools from the company Telerik. They have a product line which basically checks for the validation of all the screens that you have designed. That definitely we have used in the past, and we had no challenges. Now, there's one more thing which I would like to add to the toolkit. As an enterprise development shop, we definitely rely a lot on Microsoft DFS, and Iron Speed integrates with Microsoft DFS in a very effective manner. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Akesh. Alan is asking, are training videos for Iron Speed available? Absolutely. Simply go to ironspeed.com/training, and there are actually close to 50 different training videos that are available over here. We've actually got a fairly extensive mechanism to help you, not just the training videos, but also 1,000+ pages of documentation that is searchable through the knowledge base. Of course, we've got technical support available, but another great resource is, of course, the forum where you can have Q&A and interact with other MVPs, including a private MVP-only forum, as well as these kind of interactive webinars that help teach and coach you along as well. Rick is asking, I assume an MVP is a person, not a company. So do leads go to the person or the company he works for? Rick, MVPs could be, there are MVP individuals and MVP consulting organizations that are both there. I might suggest you go to ironspeed.com/MVP to look at these things. So it could be both a person or a company effectively, and obviously based on what it is, the leads will go to the appropriate person. Alan is also asking, can you add third-party controls? And I think we already answered that question from a number of MVPs here. John is asking, should I require my customers to buy a copy of Iron Speed for installation on their server? First of all, the answer to that question is yes, and I'll give Akesh an opportunity to also address this issue as well. For a variety of reasons, we recommend that, and we strongly actually require that whenever you are building an application for a customer, that you bundle in a copy of Iron Speed Designer with that, because what it allows you to do is essentially allows the customer effectively to take that, and then in the future, if they are maintaining that application, they have that version available in order to maintain that, regardless of whether we have moved on to another version or not. Now, in terms of installation on the server itself, there is no requirement that you have to actually install Iron Speed Designer on a server. Once the generative application is created, you can then simply take that generative application and install that on the server. Akesh, you want to add anything to this?
Sure. What I would like to say here is that as a consultant, we definitely have made a tremendous effort to close a lead into becoming a customer. The last thing you want the customer to ever feel is that you left them hanging or left them in a position where they are stuck. That's exactly why we always recommend and price a license with our software solution, just so that the client feels comfortable, as Razi said. In addition, the more you are open to a client, they are more likely to use the toolkit or tool set that you have given them into other projects and really see a value in it.
Thank you very much, Akesh. I've got about 6 or 7 questions over here, so please be patient with us here, and I'll try to get to all of those questions. Paul is asking, what databases does Iron Speed support? Iron Speed Designer supports 4 of the most popular databases and all different versions of these databases. These include Microsoft Access, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, as well as MySQL, and many different versions of that. John is asking, what report writer tool do you recommend? Crystal Reports, any others? James, you want to answer this?
I'm sorry, Razi, I didn't hear your question.
Oh, sorry about that. I said, what report writer tool do you recommend, Crystal Reports or any other?
We've certainly used Crystal Reports. We also use a product called SyncFusion, which gives you very easy access into the Microsoft Office type object model so that you can write Word reports, you can write PDF documents, and Excel spreadsheets directly from an ASP.NET application. So yes, we use Crystal, but we've also used or made an extensive use of SyncFusion.
Jim, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, we try to avoid Crystal where possible because of the licensing requirements, and also, well, there's a lot of reasons. But what we try to, but we still will use Crystal if the customer demands it or their existing team is familiar with that. But we favor SQL Server reporting services and making our reports, and we can build them right into IronSpeed. So when they click a button, it pops up a PDF or it shows in an iframe of sorts, or some way that it looks fully baked into the application.
Thank you very much, Jim. John is asking, do you know of anyone who has interfaced an IST application with QuickBooks? Anybody? Jim, James,
Sure.
Akesh?
Actually, again, I would love to take that question here, Razi, because yes, we definitely have integrated the QuickBooks as a backend, where a customer of ours would like to show his clients their data. So what we ended up doing was build an IronSpeed application which takes care of the front end for a client, but at the back end we wrote a service which is responsible for syncing the data with the QuickBooks, and we were able to successfully even create invoices and send reminders because the QuickBooks XML API is now available either for a fee from third-party companies or from QuickBooks at this present time.
Thank you very much, Akesh. Jamie is asking, are guys working on tools to build mobile apps? Anyone want to take that one?
Sure, I will do that too. I will take this question. We are now actually developing applications for iPhone because if you now notice, the iPhones are becoming more popular, but they all rely on web services. So there are definitely components for UI side, which of course if you are doing something for iPhone, they have their own toolkit to develop. But when it comes to data-driven part, the entire data section of any front-end application, you can very effectively use IronSpeed, and this is where I was trying to refer to using IronSpeed's rock-solid data access layer and using that to build your web services.
Thank you very much, Akesh. Roger is asking, IronSpeed appears to be great for UI. What tools are being used for reporting purposes? I think, Roger, we just answered that question by both James and Jim, who talked about Crystal Reports as well as SQL Server reporting services as well. Benson is asking, can we call another application from an IronSpeed application, example, an executable Windows application? Benson, I think this is more of a question about for web applications in general. It's not really an IronSpeed Designer issue. When you have an IronSpeed Designer application, it's a web application, and when you are effectively invoking a Windows application, or you are trying to invoke a Windows application locally on the machine, for example, of the client, or on the server. If you're doing it on the local machine effectively, then that could be as easy as essentially downloading certain file in order to actually open up an application, almost similar to what iTunes does as an example. Or if it is on the server, then really the question is, what is the purpose of that effectively? You don't want to essentially launch some application on the server and kind of be running in the background effectively. So this is more of a question really that you might want to discuss with support, but really I need to understand a little bit more about what are the underlying reasons for you trying to do that so that we can address that. Christian is asking, can I integrate IronSpeed Designer with Microsoft TFS or SourceSafe? I think, Akesh, you talked a little bit about that. You want to maybe address it in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Razi. Yes, we definitely have used. We are right now using TFS 2010, and the RNSpeed version 6X and onward are fully compatible with the TFS. I have not used any other version control just because most of the corporations we deal with, they're all using TFS, and it integrates in a very nice manner.
Thank you, Akesh. Jim or James, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to just say that that we tend to try to use or steer towards subversion, and when they don't have a source control system in place, we set it all up in subversion, which is a open source. And if they do have a system in place, we found that so far it seems to be subversion over and over again as well. So we tend to use subversion in ours, and RNSpeed plays very nicely with subversion. Subversion is what you might call optimistic rather than pessimistic, so it doesn't lock the files and prevent you from using it. And each of the developers on the team can simply change and freely move about the cabin, as it were, changing code, and then checking their changes when they're all done. So it's comfortable.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jim. SSRS, thanks, Jim. Anthony is saying, okay. I'll pass it on to Jim here. Patrick is asking, has anyone associated emails from Outlook to database records in IronSpeed Designer? So has anyone associated emails from Outlook to database records in IronSpeed Designer? Any of you care to answer that?
If the question is referring to receiving inbound emails into a database and then using IronSpeed Designer to read that, then yes, we've done that on a number of different applications. There's a third-party component, I think it's called ASP.NET POP3 from memory, which is very cheap and sort of fairly widely available. It makes it a complete breeze. It's a very simple API. We'll pull emails into SQL Server, and then you can build an IronSpeed application based on that table. So that's very easily done, if that's the question.
Okay, thank you so much, James. I have two more questions left over here, and both of these questions I think can be really answered by any or all of you, and maybe each one of you might want to take a couple of minutes here to answer these questions. Hal is asking, have any of the MVPs ever been challenged by an organization whereby the organization's developers have been resistant to using IronSpeed Designer, and they have come in and shown the speed advantage of using a tool like IronSpeed Designer? In other words, kind of a side-by-side comparison. So maybe each one of you can maybe take a minute or so to answer this question. Jim, you want to start?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, these I guess we've experienced all kinds of different varieties of this. I've been to teams where they are not familiar with IronSpeed. They already have 4 or 5 or 6 different developers, non-IronSpeed. Some of them kind of see the light and understand what IronSpeed's value is, and some of them are resistant. And with the series of meetings and showing demos and explaining how it works, usually what I've found was the developer's biggest complaint or fear about code generators is how unchangeable the code is, and how once you use it, then that's it. You can't go back and regenerate. And those are just simply not true with IronSpeed. IronSpeed has everything set up with a nice object-oriented overriding methodology, so it retains all of the changes that you make. So every time I've had people, I guess you can say, trying to sling mud or gang up or whatever, I've been able to just kind of handle the questions and objectively explain where the values are and how that's really not the case in this scenario. And that has led to several projects where they began using IronSpeed, and we got the project going.
Okay, James, thank you so much, Jim. James, you want to see if you can answer that?
Yes, I mean, we're in a very similar position to Jim, and I'm sure Akesh. We normally find that resistance is from developers. Frankly, I can understand it. I was a developer, and if I saw a product like IronSpeed that effectively looked like it could largely do me out of a job, I probably wouldn't be terribly keen on it either. We've recently started working with government agencies here in the UK who are adopting the product, and in the face of fairly stiff budget cuts, they're clearly looking for a better and quicker and cheaper way to deliver the results their user base needs. Effectively, the users, the developers rather, in those organizations, they're simply not being given a choice, and every technical sort of obstacle they've attempted to put in the way of the management has been pushed aside by the abilities of designer. So it's something we've encountered quite frequently, but I've yet to find a scenario in which the concerns of the developer base, if you like, were readily sort of adopted and adhered to by the management. So it's tended to be feared, if you like, slightly by the developer and embraced by the manager who's controlling the budget.
Akesh, you've got something to add to that?
Sure. As a matter of fact, most of the time when we are actually called, we are always called when the projects are kind of over budget and behind schedule. And usually after talking to the customer for the first time and delivering the product on time and on budget, a lot of developers are often curious, what was the magic tool? How did you do it? And of course, as everybody says, there's always some kind of reservations about making the switch. But if given an opportunity where you can share with them in positive manner how things are really structured, I definitely have been able to convert some shops to totally going iron speed. And one of the bigger challenges which I faced was a lot of time people just assume that if you're using iron speed, you're only limited to iron speed. One of the things which I always mention to everyone is pages in iron speed and non-iron speed, which means Visual Studio, they have no problem coexisting. So a lot of folks always have this dilemma, if I'm in iron speed, I'm stuck with iron speed. That is not true. As soon as you show them that they can open up a project in Visual Studio and add a page or 2 or 5, what they would have done in Studio themselves anyway, they basically start to feel more comfortable. And then on top of it, if you show them that now they have the advantage of relying on the data access layer and the business layer, it's become so easy. That basically is one of my biggest selling points, that if you were to do something in Visual Studio, you can keep doing in Visual Studio. You don't have to do everything in iron speed, but let iron speed do what it's good at.
Thank you so much, Akesh and James and Jim. Jamie is asking, having long years of experience working for a company using Iron Speed Designer, what are the 3 key elements to get started as consultant/contractor? Akesh, you want to see if you can summarize the 3 key elements that
Sure.
kind of got you started?
Sure. First of all, you have to believe in the product. You have to believe in the product that it works. You just can't give it up by saying, oh, let me go back to the studio way. And the second thing you have to do is you have to make sure you have done your homework, depending on which geographical area you're living in. You can definitely start going to the .NET user groups, try to make sure that you have enough leads coming through before you leap in. What I did, as a matter of fact, when I went on my own, I basically diversified a bit by saying I'm going to be a developer, but since I'm a developer, I'm also going to start doing .NET training. So being that I was always in the training industry helped me talk to a lot of people, and that's where basically it helped me out a lot. So of course, you have to make sure you have enough contacts. They may not be your employees, but you have to have enough people in your Rolodex who you can rely on for working together with you as you get some bigger projects sometimes.
Thank you so much, Akesh. James, you want to add something to that? 3 key elements.
Yeah, I would. I mean, really, the designer side, if you're skilled with designer, in a way that's almost the one element of running the successful business that you wouldn't need to worry about. I would sort of suggest you focus more on the sort of business acumen or general business acumen of running a company and running yourself as a contractor, if you like, rather than thinking about designer, because as I've possibly said a few times, we've never found a scenario where designer hasn't enabled us to deliver, and as a consequence, I wouldn't necessarily worry about that side. It'd be things like, how are you going to find your customers? Of course, if you're through the MVP program, that would help you in that way, but it would be the sort of greater administration side of running a company that I would focus some attention on, rather necessarily than just your technical skill. I know a number of people, not necessarily with designer, but other developers who've begun their own businesses, and where they've failed, they've tended to fail on the business side of running the company rather than the technical side and their expertise.
Great. Jim, you want to add the 3 key elements from your side that benefited you as you got started into this business?
Yeah, sure. I definitely agree with Akesh and James that as developers, it's sometimes easy for us to build a product or build some technology piece that's amazing, but then it's hard to find a way to market it or hard to get it out the door. And I've known a lot of developers that have been very sharp technically and just have not been able to sell what they've created. So as a consultant, you need more rounded out skills in all areas, not just running a business, because IronSpeed is not going to solve your running a business issues. You still have to run your own business. But it does assist with the MVP program. And also, from a technical perspective, you are expected to be a very, how do you say, I guess high grade, well, consultant level developer. So if somebody hires you to come in and do some work, they kind of expect you to understand common solutions, common design patterns, and common ways of solving issues. And if you find yourself constantly saying, I'm not sure, I don't know, I'll have to go research that, well, that tends to make people uncomfortable. So it really takes a lot, but nonetheless, the rewards are great with the IronSpeed product.
Thank you so much, Jim. Quite often I use what I call the Home Depot analogy. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's today you can go out and buy every single piece of the thing that you need in order to build a house from the ground up. You can buy the rebar that's needed in order to lay the foundation. You can buy the cement and the 2x4s and the roofing materials and everything else that you would need in order to build that house, basically, right? But why would you do that? Why wouldn't you essentially let a product like IronSpeed Designer create that structure for you, that entire end-tier application layer for you, and so that you can essentially focus in on really adding it, making that house into a home effectively by essentially decorating it, essentially adding your own carpet, adding your own paint, adding your own nice little artwork and everything else that goes along with that. That is really where the benefit of IronSpeed Designer comes into place. And so you as MVPs can effectively then take advantage of your expertise in essentially understanding the client situation, understanding the client requirements, and then essentially applying it and mapping it to the product that gets generated as part of IronSpeed Designer. That is where really the benefit of IronSpeed Designer comes into place effectively, so that yes, you have the ability to essentially nail every 2x4 in and put the drywall in there and paint that and so on and so forth. But why not let IronSpeed Designer do the nitty-gritty detail work that IronSpeed Designer can do for you in an environment which is essentially across the board, for the same for all of your applications. And not only that, it has been well tested by thousands and tens of thousands and millions of folks across the world, so that you don't have to go through your own testing cycle effectively in order to verify your applications over here. Got a couple of quick last questions over here that I'll answer, and then just give an opportunity to kind of summarize for all 3 of our MVP folks that are on this call over here, and then call that a day here. So last couple of questions here. Please make this available as a recording. It will be priceless. Hal is saying that. Absolutely, we'll consider that. Let me pass that on to the folks here and do that. John is asking, I developed a multi-company ISD app which can be accessed by companies anywhere in the world by simply logging. Do each of the companies need a licensed copy of IronSpeed Designer? No, they don't need a licensed copy of IronSpeed Designer, because IronSpeed Designer essentially creates the applications, and there are no runtime licensing fees for it. So if you're offering that as a SaaS model, go ahead and do that, and that's not a problem over here. And one final question that got squeezed in here, please don't forget to make the presentation materials available, Jamie is asking. Thank you very much. Good job, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So final thoughts, Akesh, James, and Jim, just a couple of minutes to summarize your final thoughts on this. You want to start, Akesh?
Sure. Again, all I can say is with my last 6 years of experience and having successful projects, I can't even imagine this much success no matter which direction I would have taken. And once you start using it, the consistency with which IronSpeed has generated the code and the amount of effort that we have saved by not doing the validation and having the clients trust our solutions, it's priceless.
James, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree entirely with Akesh. We're a software company that have been developing software well before we stumbled across Designer, and we adopted Designer, and since then, it's effectively now 100% of what we do. We don't build a web app without it. It's that simple.
Great. Jim?
And we too have been a separate consulting business doing software development for many, many years, long before we found IronSpeed as well. And in the last 7 years that we've been doing IronSpeed, we found that it ends up being easier to price our products, easier to negotiate the rates, easier to complete the products, and overall it's just been a very pleasant experience for us.
Great. Thank you very much, Akesh, James, and Jim. I really appreciate you joining us over here, and I'm sure you enjoyed, all of you, listening to their experience with using IronSpeed Designer to grow their consulting business into a significant, in each one of their ways, into a significant organization. So I do hope that all of you can benefit from this webinar and take advantage of that. Please go ahead and do contact your account managers in order to learn a little bit more about the MVP programs, but also start using IronSpeed Designer and delivering solutions with that. So I thank you again for joining us and look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Jim, James, and Akesh, thank you so much as well for joining us today and giving your perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.